Hi everybody, I'm Pam. I'm the Executive Director for Weymouth Food Pantry, and welcome again to Our Living series. In this little series that we're going to be doing, we're going to be focusing on gardening. So I am so thrilled and excited to welcome today Todd from the Grateful Garden. I've known Todd for many years, and he is a gardener that just has the Midas touch. He inspires me always to try new things and to be unafraid in the garden and to, I guess, ask for forgiveness rather than permission. So welcome, Todd. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. A lot of people call me the Grateful Gardener because I'm always talking about how grateful I am to get my hands in the soil and feel the soil and then watch plants grow. I love watching plants grow. It's inspirational to me. They are so incredibly capable if you give them the chance. And so as long as you don't stand in the way of them, they'll do what they want to do, which is grow. And so we're going to give you some great tips today on how to grow and what you need to grow. And we're going to make it as easy as possible, and we're going to inspire you.
Awesome. So let's get started.
All right, everybody, we're going to get into Gardening 101. But before we do that, I want to start by pointing out something that's really, really important to me. Plants have a way of having an influence in our lives, and something really awesome happened in my life. I started a small business and we built this garden very similar to this, and unfortunately the business didn't work out quite right, but then good people from the community knew that that soil was there and had a purpose for it, and this is it right here, and it's truly inspirational. The community came together to build this garden beside the church with funding from multiple different groups on the South Shore, and they brought this right here. Last year we grew over 5,000 pounds of produce in here. It was all donated directly to the food pantry patrons on the day that it was picked, as fresh as it could be, and that is beyond inspirational. To know that that part of our community exists and is willing to put their neck out there to make this happen is a true joy. Forget about the plants. Just know that the people out there were willing to do this is enough inspiration for me in life. I'll grow plants for the rest of my life because I love it, but today we're just going to talk about some simple things for you to get inspired to grow food. Super healthy, super fresh, it never tastes as good as when it comes from your garden. Even just one tomato plant out of an old 5-gallon bucket is going to be fresher and tastier than any tomato that you're ever going to get from the grocery store. I could talk for hours about why our food system is not designed to be delivering us the freshest, tastiest produce, but I'm not going to do that today because we have limited time, and you come here on a Saturday when I'm volunteering out here and I'll tell you all about it. Your head will spin probably, you may not even like it, but the good news is that you can grow in your yard. You can definitely grow things in your yard. So we're going to start off with 3 things. We're going to start off with talking about the sunlight that it takes. We're then going to talk about some space requirements and different types of things to grow in, and then we're going to cover the soil and how to improve it and how to make your own. All right, so let's start with the first question I always get when people are asking about starting a garden. How much light do I need? It's really not that complicated. 6 to 8 hours of high quality sunshine a day is perfect. You can grow most anything here in Massachusetts with 6 to 8 hours of light. Below that, 4 to 6 hours of light. Most of our favorite plants, tomatoes and beans and cucumbers, will have a little bit less yield and they'll grow a little bit slower. For instance, these green beans that are out here in the sun right here are at least a foot tall, versus the ones that are back underneath the tree in the shade are almost half the growth, planted the same day. So obviously you can see the things will still grow, but it's just going to grow a little slower, and you may get a little bit less yield. All right, so now we're going to talk about space and some different styles of gardening in either containers or in the ground or in raised beds. This is a raised bed garden here at the church at the Weymouth Food Pantry Garden. This is a lot of space. This is a tremendous amount of effort to be able to do this large of a space, but it could certainly feed a family of 4 all summer with very little shopping at the grocery store or needing extra. As a beginning gardener though, I'm not going to recommend that you go any more than starting in one 4x8 raised bed, like these ones that we have here, or even to be honest, a tomato, basil, and a marigold in a 5-gallon bucket. Super great way to get started. It's easy. Tomatoes love containers, and they're also super happy with marigold and basil, so they all kind of get happy together. So if you want to start small, super easy: tomato, basil, marigold. If you want to get a little bit more adventurous and something totally manageable for one person, you can use a 4x8 raised bed. There's several features to use in raised beds that I really like. They improve the drainage and they increase your access, and it makes it a lot easier to get into the things. Also, the reason we choose 4x8 is because your arm length is 2 feet, easy, so you can reach to the center. You can also kneel on the edge. So a raised bed is an awesome place to start. It's great for all levels. If you don't have space for a 4x8, you could also have something like this raised bed, which we're growing chives in. They're happy in here. And then obviously this is an example of containers. These are way too small for these tomatoes. Would they make it? Yeah, absolutely. And tomatoes are so tough they would bear fruit in these little containers. But you need generally about 5 gallons for most of the plants. Eggplants, peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes, zucchini would all need at least 5 gallons. The difference between a raised bed and growing in a container is that raised beds don't need to be watered as often. They're often connected to the ground, obviously, because they're sitting on the ground, so they retain moisture better. A container has a lot more stress on it. The outside of the container gets hit by the sunlight, which also increases the soil temperature on the inside, which accelerates the evaporation in the soil. So you do have to water more frequently, and we're going to talk about watering after we get through this because it's one of the most important things in gardening. But choosing the space for you is based on what you have. If you have the resources to put all of this in the space, have at it. That would be great, and there's definitely people that would help you with that. Or if you're just a beginner, start with the 4x8, or if you're a real beginner, start with the tomato, basil, marigold in the 5-gallon bucket, and it's a great way to go. All right, so now you've chosen a location and you've chosen a method that you're going to use to contain your soil. So let's talk briefly about soils and the different applications. One of my favorite ways to get soil is called lasagna gardening. It's something that anybody can do. It's made with readily available ingredients, and it's very much like it sounds like, making a lasagna, where you're literally making layers of organic materials. Organic materials being straw, leaves, shredded newspaper, weeds, grass clippings, vegetable scraps, coffee grounds. And what you do is you layer them out in a dry brown layer and then a green layer. The brown layers would be straw and newspaper and shredded paper, things like that are the browns. They're going to be in a 2-to-1 ratio to green. So you're going to have 2 parts brown, 1 part green. Green stuff, fresh grass clippings, your vegetable scraps, and you just make layers until you get to about 12 to 16 inches tall. Oh wait, most important, you can do this anywhere. You can do it on a lawn, you can do it on bare dirt, but it's very important to start with one thing, and that's cardboard. Corrugated cardboard, you lay it down and it's going to act and do some really important things. One, it's going to suppress the weeds from growing up into the bed. Anything that was in the soil that you covered is now going to get suppressed. It won't grow up into your bed. And secondly, worms love cardboard. They're absolutely nuts about it. So when you put cardboard down on the soil, worms are instantly attracted to the bacteria that feeds on the glue, and they just go to Happy Town and start breaking it down. Cover it with some organic things like dried leaves, seaweed, and vegetables. It's going to make it even happier. The next thing I recommend is at the end, after you make all your layers, cover it with a few sheets of newspaper and then some weed-free straw. So the newspaper will act as a barrier to weeds getting in. It'll also help from any weeds that were in the materials, from getting out, and it'll help retain moisture by having the straw on top. So it's as easy as making your layers, covering it with some straw, and then waiting. There is some timing involved. The best time to do it is in the summer leading into the next spring, because you do have to have time for the materials to break down. There's one cool hack to this. If you don't have time to let it break down all of the way, you still have the opportunity to grow into it just by making a pocket into the bed, and you can fill that with some compost and then plant your plants into it, and that'll get you through that year. Lasagna beds are fun to make, and they're really inexpensive ways to build excellent fluffy soil for any type of plant you want to grow. It doesn't have to be vegetables, it could certainly be for flowers or herbs. So love the lasagna bed. Some people call it sheet mulching. Excellent, excellent way to go. If you're going to go with the 4x8 raised bed, that gives you the luxury of creating the soil exactly how you want it. You can buy 10 different types of compost. You could buy pre-mixed bag potting soils and fill it up, which would be very expensive, more cost effective to bring in compost in a bulk form from a local company. You can get it delivered. And then the next thing I would add would be sand. The reason I would add sand at a ratio of say 4 parts soil to 1 part sand is it'll help improve the drainage. And also it's sand. Sand is made up of all different types of broken down rock, and believe it or not, in a healthy soil, broken down rock feeds a fungal network. And one of the coolest things that I've ever learned about gardening is that 95% of all plants have formed a symbiotic relationship, a mutualistic relationship with fungi and bacteria in the soil, and they exchange nutrients. And it's not that complicated. The plants take the sunlight and they use that to do photosynthesis, which they use the process of photosynthesis to create simple sugars. They excrete those simple sugars out of their roots, and where they are down in the soil, the network of fungi come over and they actually link up to the plant's roots where they can exchange resources. The fungi don't do photosynthesis, but they do have the ability to release enzymes, and they release those enzymes onto those little bits of rock, which frees up all of the minerals, and they are able to move it through the network and exchange it with the plants for the sugar. If that's not cool, I don't know what is. Now, it's not that hard to find mycelium. It's all over. It's in wood chips. Oh, awesome point, wood chips. One of the best things you can do to bring into your garden. It's an excellent way to make pathways, and it's also a great way to bring in that fungal network. Any new modern micro farmer will tell you the most productive part in his garden is the paths, because the mycelium and the fungal network that comes in with those wood chip paths blows the garden up. So go out in the woods and turn over a log and take a little scoop of that soil, and you're bound to have mycelium in it. Add it to your garden and begin the network. If you're in this 4x8 raised bed, get the best compost you can. Get a couple different kinds of compost. You'll get more diversity in the minerals and the biology, and then add that sand to feed the mycelial network and also to improve your drainage. If you're going to grow in a container of any sort, a 5-gallon bucket, I highly recommend just buying a pre-mixed potting soil. You're going to have the best results with that because they're specially blended for containers. The nutrients are all blended in well. And actually, some companies even sell potting soils that are already inoculated with probiotics. So you can get the bacteria and the fungi already in the soil, which will help your plants indefinitely. I can't even begin to tell you the difference when you have that biological influence on your plants. So go for the biology. Do a lasagna bed because that already starts the whole biological process by the composting process. Or go for the raised bed and get the best possible soils you can. And always be concentrating on drainage and helping improve that biology. Right, so now let's talk about watering. Watering is, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of home vegetable gardening. You can either give it too much or too little, or just right. And to get it just right, you need 1 to 2 inches of water a week, which means that you're going to need to be watering every 3 to 7 days or so. But you need to water deeply. A lot of people think that they should water every day, and they water it and they water a little bit, but there's a problem with that. When the soil is only wet a little bit at the top, it doesn't give the plant any incentive to send its roots down deep where you want it. You want the plants to go deep, and the way that you get them to do that is by watering really deeply. So as the water goes deep down into the soil, the plants are stimulated to send their roots down into the soil to get after that water. If you water a little bit every day, it's only going to be moist at the very top of the soil, so why would the plant send its roots down deep? Great if you can water every day, but what happens when it's 90 degrees and you get home from work, it's too hot, you just want to, I don't know what you want to do, but you don't want to go out into the garden, and then your plants only have roots in the top inches. That's not going to be good for them because it's 90 degrees, that soil is going to dry so fast. So if you have a nice deep root that's further down, it gives you the time to be able to miss a day, to skip a day, or to wait a week. I barely water. I'm like the worst waterer. One of the biggest lessons I've learned by being here at the Weymouth Food Pantry Garden is the watering is done way better than I've ever done it, and there's a reason. It's because they have irrigation. If this fits in your budget, it's the way to go. You can set it on a timer, or you can just turn it on for an hour every other day or every few days and keep the soil really moist. I would still use an irrigation system. If I did, I'm a hand waterer, but if I did use an irrigation system, I would still want to set it to water every 3 to 7 days so that the soil did dry out, because you don't want the soil to be sopping wet all the time. Nobody likes cold, wet feet, and most plants don't really enjoy their feet being wet all the time, especially the garden plants that we like to grow. So you do need that soil to dry out. To me, the most effective way to water is by hand. I prefer to water with a hand-held hose on a wand, like that I can get right down to the base of the plant. I don't want to water over the plants. I don't want to use a sprinkler for one reason. Wet plants are more susceptible to diseases, powdery mildew, the blight. A damp, wet plant is going to be a place where those diseases can take a host on their leaves because they need the water to do that. So if you water at the base of the plant, you're doing two things. One, you're keeping the water directly at the base of the plant so it keeps it dry, and you can also eliminate any soil from splashing up on the plants, because believe it or not, the pathogens that might be a problem in your garden are actually in the soil, and they will splash up onto the plant. So keeping the plants watered from the base and not overhead keeps them dry. Watering at the base versus with a gun or a hose or a sprinkler or something keeps the soil from splashing up. And most important to me about hand watering is it gives me a chance to get into the garden. And that's when I do my best work. I can water and weed, I can inspect for pests, I can inspect for diseases, I can check on how they're growing. I can just actually look at them and be happy and be like, wow, this is awesome, these tomatoes are doing terrific. I'm doing a really great job this year, and I give myself a little pat on the back. But it's also a great excuse just to be out in the garden and to get your hands in the soil. So one of the recommendations I make often in regards to watering is that folks do the cake test. Like when you bake a cake, you stick a toothpick in, and the toothpick comes out clean, it's time to take the cake out. For instance, in the soil, you do the same thing. You stick your finger in, and your finger comes out wet. Obviously, the soil doesn't need to be watered. If your finger came out clean and dry, it would be time to water. Awesome way to get in touch with the soil and to know what's going on in your garden is with the cake test. So with watering, we covered how much, 1 to 2 inches of water a week. Best method for ease and efficiency is to use an irrigation system. For the gardener, my opinion is to hand water at the base of the plants because it gets you into the garden and you're able to inspect the plants. And then no overhead watering. Wet plants are susceptible to diseases. So keep those plants dry and keep that soil moist till 1 to 2 inches of water a week. All right, so let's wrap this up with a quick talk on tomatoes. Tomatoes are an awesome plant for the beginning gardener, and there's one reason why. They're incredibly durable. They're so tough and so resilient. So tough and resilient that they could actually grow out of the crack in the sidewalk or the crack of a loading dock, or in very little soil. Take for instance these here. These are some tomato seedlings that I never managed to get into the ground this year. They're literally in very, very little soil, and yet they are actually producing fruit. Just in this tiny bit of soil. Look at how it's lost all its leaves. It's in essence dying. The roots are coming out the bottom, which is going to be one of the ways that they gain nutrients. But this is a great lesson for you to know how your plants are doing. In general, when a plant has a lighter green leaf, it means that it's lacking nitrogen. As you can see in this, the difference in these two here, it's much lighter. The leaves of these tomatoes that have been planted in good nutrient-rich soil are much deeper green. If you take a look at this little guy, this is the same exact variety as this one here. It's in a much smaller pot. It is deeper green because it's more soil than this, but look at the difference between the size. They were both planted on the same day, same variety, Cherokee Purple, my personal favorite heirloom slicing tomato. It doesn't taste any better than a Cherokee Purple. Sorry, my plug for the Cherokee Purples, they're awesome. But look at, you can tell the difference. And then this one, this is a branch that broke off, and this is a really cool thing to see. All these bumps on here, these are the tomato's adaptation to be able to re-root into the ground. So if this branch were to fall onto the ground, all of these bumps would have the ability to turn into roots that can go into the ground. When you plant a tomato, oftentimes you'll already start to see the roots. I'm not gonna plant the great big one, I'm gonna plant the smaller one. Just so you can kind of get an idea. Oh, plant one of these ones? Yeah, because these are cherry actually. Let's see. Oh, I have sun gold. Let's see, these will come back. If you come out to bed number 23 at the Weymouth Food Pantry and you take a look at these guys in a few weeks, they are gonna look totally different, and I guarantee you they are gonna be thriving because we're gonna give them what they want. We're gonna give them soil to grow into, and we're gonna do it at a depth that's gonna allow them to thrive. So I'm gonna dig a really deep hole. I'm gonna dig it as deep down as I can get it into this raised bed and beyond, right? So this guy, let's go with you, no? Yeah, let's go with this little guy here. All right, so super root bound. Look at the roots are all in there. These pots are excellent. They're not on the market anymore, but they trained the roots to go down, which is great for us. But I am actually going to bury this tomato down here as deep as I can. I'm gonna push those roots down in there, and then I'm gonna cover the whole stem. The stem will actually root out. All these little guys right here, these volunteer plants that came up from last year, I know this is gonna sound crazy, but they contain the nutrients that the tomato leaves. So I love that they're here. They're gonna break down in the soil and feed this plant. Remember, bed 23 right here at the end of the garden. Come and check this guy out in a few weeks and see what it's done. It's gonna be amazing. Especially with its friend basil next to it.
Thank you so much for joining us. I always learn something when I spend time with Todd, and I hope you did too.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun for me. It was a little bit on the cuff. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I want to make sure everybody knows how grateful and thankful I am to all the people in the community and Pam for making this happen, and these videos as well. You can find out more about me at www.thegratefulgardenma.com. That's my website, and you can get in contact with me there for consultations, classes, workshops, and any help you would need establishing a vegetable garden. And we hope you have happy gardening out there.
Yeah, and truthfully, you would have no better speaker than Todd, and he's well versed on so many gardening topics, from compost to soil health to biochar to pest control, whatever it is. Any aspect of gardening, he's your guy.
Yep, anything organic.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had fun, and I hope you feel inspired to start small, start somewhere, and start today.